Welcome to the Samuele Tini Show, where business, innovation and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in. Welcome to a new episode. And today we are going to discuss trade, business, and commerce with somebody who is leading, the strategic initiatives and the International Chamber for Commerce. So I'm very pleased to have here today Sebastian Ferrari. Thank you so much, Sebastian, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Samuel, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today.
And Sebastian, you have been at the Agri-Food. You are now a strategic initiative. You are at the chamber. You come from the global south, from Argentina. But we want now to ask a bit quick intro. I mean, what is your background? How you have ended up in commerce?
Well, first of all, I studied economics in Buenos Aires. It's my city where I born. I started, just to talk about the Chamber of Commerce, I started to work in the Argentine Chamber of Commerce like 10 years ago in the Department of Economics. Well, there I did different things. One of them, of course, related to agribusiness, but in general, analyzing the macroeconomics that, as you probably can imagine, in Argentina is exciting because it's a lot of volatility, not the same information every day. But in 2019, some years after, the Argentinian Chamber offered me the position to be in charge of the National Committee of ICC, that is the International Chamber of Commerce, in the Buenos Aires, the Argentinian Chamber chapter. Well, I started working in this international framework from there. And then in 2023, I started to work directly for the headquarters of the organization that is in Paris. As you know, I started working as an agri-food leader and expert.
And for the people that are not familiar, with what is the ICC? What is it doing? And which are the objectives? Why is it important in our global context?
Okay, well, just to simplify, ICC is basically the World Business Organization. It was created more than 100 years ago in 1919 to help business support peace, trade, and international cooperation. The founders at that moment were called the Merchants of Peace, with the idea that when countries trade more, they can reduce the probability of conflicts. You can imagine in Central Europe at that moment that the conflicts were the most important impact on international trade and people wellness also. So then I can mention also that ICC produces nowadays trade standards like the Incoterms 2020 or the UCP 600 for trade finance. And also they have the most important dispute resolution mechanisms from the private sector. And today we have a global network with representation in more than 170 countries and representing estimated 45 million companies. And the last thing that I can mention to you is that ICC has also a permanent observer status at the United Nations, where we bridge between public and private sectors.
And thank you, Sebastian, for that. And we will go back to that founders really objective, trade that promote peace, which today, with our context, seems now becoming more and more difficult. I want to go a bit more in your work first with the agri-food initiative, because it's really important, especially for the global south. We have a overwhelming booming population. We need to produce more. Most countries import more. So why food is so important, and how businesses can help really solve this crisis?
The ICC Agri-Food Initiative is essentially a platform to connect professionals, businesses, institutions, and international organizations around practical solutions for food systems. We work basically in three big areas: sustainability, trade, and innovation. But in practical terms, I could say that we try to create bridges between companies and international markets. So there is one point, market access between the private sector and organizations from the public sector, like FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, that is with the headquarters in Rome. and between policy discussions and real challenges on the ground. So this is our focus in the Agri-Food Initiative. Now we have 30 countries activated, and we have like different, depending on the needs, we have different conversations about nowadays. Of course, the European Union regulations about sustainability, but they are becoming international standards. So there are a lot of discussions about sustainability, deforestation, traceability, market access, and so on.
And which is the perspective of the global south in this, let's say, broader, agri-food system? Since you come, from a agricultural powerhouse that is Argentina.
Nowadays, of course, from the south perspective, if you want to trade with the more developed markets, you have to put attention also in the international standards, that are related, of course, with some of the global challenges, that are part of the consumer preferences and the international rules nowadays. That is taking into account the climate issues and regulations, things related with the use of the natural resources, that are also related with climate, that is water scarcity. But in terms also thinking in the south perspective and maybe in Africa, you have topics like energy generation, that is crucial for economic development, migration. If you want to retain workforce, also this sector can generate quality job positions. About geopolitics, of course, if you don't have enough food production for your market, or you don't generate a surplus in the foreign market, it could generate geopolitics troubles. Also inflation, if you don't have the input for producing. And at the end, it's about social stability. So it's a very delicate topic.
And this part is very crucial now, Sebastian, if I may ask, because it goes back to the idea. The global trade was established, especially the Chamber of Commerce, with the merchant, you say the merchant of peace. We want really to see how trade can foster peace. Now, trade has been reshaped. In the past, let's say 1 year or 2 years, we have seen tariffs, we have seen disruption, we have seen now the strait that is closed. So, what is the response? I would say, I mean, you're going even broader than the agri-food. What is the response of the ICC to these global threats, which you say they are also social threats?
Okay, yeah, Samuel, you mentioned before and the growth in the global population. We achieved in November 2022 the 8 billion people in the world, and is projected by United Nations to achieve 9.7 by 2050, and there will be a peak after that of 10 million people in the second part of the 21st century. And so, of course, it's a big challenge for the food system. And there are three core ideas that are not mine. Of course, a lot of people are talking about it. That is about resilience, diversification, and openness. The last one probably related with the idea of the merchants of peace, because we need nowadays probably less dependency on concentrated supply chains, but it doesn't mean that it is with less trade. So we need more trade, but less concentration. So the solution there is that we have to think that resilience is related with diversification, regional integration, because I have the numbers mainly from Latin America, that if you see the trade, the food trade in particular, there is a lot in the cases from Argentina, Brazil, and many others that trade more, of course, because of the size of the market, but they trade more with China, United States, or Europe, and very, very low performance. And I imagine the same scenario in countries in Africa. And it's sometimes because it wasn't explored, and there is not a regional supply chain integration. And there, I think is part of the solution, So we have to diversify and try not to depend only in the big powers of the world, but also have a good regional integration.
And this is very important. If I can ask a subsequent question, is this regional integration a bit a response, to these fortresses that America is putting up, other countries are putting up and tariffs? How a business association like yours can help, remove the barriers? Because we know that trade usually foster peace, foster connection, and decreases, tension.
Yes, well, at the end, companies and countries where they directly trade take the decision. No, what we notice is that nowadays we are seeing a transition that was maybe in some years ago like a kind of efficiency globalization. No, you buy and you get your input and the final product where is better quality at better price. But nowadays is turning to a more resilience-oriented globalization. No, so it's not only the best decision for this moment, but also it's like an intertemporal decision. You try to reduce the risk in the at least in the middle term, no, to get different market access.
In a world that is very volatile, if I say that, of course, you need to reshape yourself. And I want to ask a bit of the model, no, and the work that you are doing with the ICC and your members. I do a lot of work with cooperative. I do a lot of work on things. So is it there a way also they can benefit, how they can be integrated? Or you are just working with the higher and bigger level of companies?
Yeah. Well, usually we work through the national committees. No, as I mentioned, I started in ICC Argentina, and we have the same in different countries. Talking about the Agri-Food Initiative, we are now working in Africa. No, because I know that you have particular interest in Africa. We are working in 5 countries: in Morocco, Nigeria, Cameroon, Kenya, and Lesotho. They are active. They are working in the Agri-Food Initiative. I've been last year in Morocco working with the national committee in a food fair in the Siam that was in Meknes in April 2025, and we connected with many stakeholders, and not only producers but also just to give you an example with academia, with entrepreneurs, and we are advancing in different projects with them. So my recommendation is try to find your local ICC there, but also in ICC we have the World Chambers Federation. It's like another a parallel network through the chambers of commerce. And there, well, in Kenya, for example, you have a very important one that is the Kenyan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and you can go there and engage through their window to the global network. And then, well, you have specific initiatives, like if you are an SME or an entrepreneur, you can access directly to the Center of Entrepreneurships. And they are talking about food and international market access. There is a project that is called the TradeRoots Africa that is run by this initiative, the Center of Entrepreneurships, and it is looking to transform the opportunities from the Africa continent free trade area in concrete results for African companies. So they have the different stages of the program. That is the readiness of exports for SMEs from Africa. Another one is facilitating the access to the finance. That is crucial for going international. Then to impulse the intra-African trade. This one that we were discussing about the importance of the regional integration. And then also connecting the African companies in the broader international ICC network. And then one of the goals also is to improve the participation or increase the participation of women young entrepreneurs in the international trade. And for that are different specific programs inside the TradeRoots Africa, but I invite you and your audience to check in the website and find the specific information of this project.
And I think it's really important, especially the last part, because sometimes it's very difficult. Usually I say it's easier to fly maybe to some other area of the world and fly maybe between capitals that are not very far because of the integration and also trade and barriers. So that is, I think, is critical because that's why also local companies can really work. I want to ask you a question a bit. You do a lot of regulations and work and everything. So there's been and will be even we had a previous episode. Now we will have different episode on these rules and regulations, especially for the European Union, which especially in the agri area it's been debated. So this UDR and other, they're well intentioned, but on the other side, some people argue, yes, but now you are putting a lot of pressures on weaker systems, like in the global south. What is your perspective on that?
Okay, well, I've been last Friday in Poland, invited by ICC Poland to an event that was exactly about Mercosur, European Union Free Trade Agreement, and a bit related. Probably you know that France and Poland government are opposed to this, basically from the lobby from the agricultural sector, and that they think they are entering into a bigger market with unfair competitors. And well, from the other side, in markets from Mercosur, they think that Europe is introducing new phytosanitary and sanitary barriers for blocking the legal trade. No, I would say that is not fair barriers from their perspective. So I think at the end that the concern is legitimate. No, I believe that the EUDR spirit is understandable and important to protect the deforestation. So we don't want global supply chains linked to the deforestation. But at the same time, well, there are, or we are a bit suspicious about the implementation of these kind of rules. No, sometimes at the end is a lot of. We noticed during the last time a lot of changes, no, and postponing the date of implementation. So the market in general was not happy with how it's been managed at the moment. So for me, implementation is the key. How to have clear rules, to work as much as needed to define the process, and well, be transparent with that. So you know what from one side, you know what can you export or what you can't. And well, from the other side, you know the volume of the market you are going to compete with. So for me, this is the challenge for the next time. How Europe is going to implement, how transparent, consistent, predictable is going to be, for the global market, and it's important also for the reputation of European Union, because nowadays it's more. We were talking about the trade that is mainly with China, United States, and Europe is a bit behind in the last decades in the international leadership. So I think it's important to have, of course, to maintain and try to level the field with the European standards, about safety, human rights, and sustainable in general terms. But at the same time, we need like a serious implementation and predictable implementation to avoid misunderstanding.
And that is very critical, because sometimes some of those regulations may seem unfair, especially or barriers to prevent the access to those markets. And if I may ask, how do you see in this crisis markets, tariffs and things, from your position at the Chamber of Commerce? How do you see the world evolving in the next maybe 5 to 10 years? We will have another wave, or we will be again in fortresses and enclosure?
Okay, well, for the next years, of course, we have the technology challenges, no, the advantage also that it provides. We are uh, nowadays we are, or I would say in the last 20 years, a high increase in the productivity because of the use and implementation of technology in the food system. At the same time, we have that we were talking that is the growth in the population in markets like China, India, and not only population, they are also growing in terms of GDP. So they have more income to access to proteins and well, of course, we need to develop a system that can be supportive to this growth in the demand. So for me, it's going to be this more people accessing in the next years, what is something good because it's less people below the line of poverty. And well, we have to be ready and to forecast these new scenarios, no? But on the other side, you know very well that there are geopolitical tensions, and this, no, about resilience, no, to also to forecast different scenarios where you could have bottlenecks because geopolitical issues, and well, we have to deal with this. Also, the climate change can affect the productivity, you know, the scarcity of water. If we maybe it's not something for the next 10 or 20 years, but for the longer term, the scarcity of water is going to be an issue. Of course, there is already technology to transform salad water into sweet one to just for irrigation, but it's still too expensive to scale. And these kind of solutions are going to be crucial for the future.
And that is very important, geopolitics and needs and others. So, as a last question before our message, do you think there is still space for the merchant of peace in this war?
Yeah, of course. And also, you can see that they are forcing both parts. If you look what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, they are forcing the other part not with bombs, but blocking the trade, no, because trade is crucial for their economies on both sides in this conflict, but also for their partners. No, China is like a main economy affected for this crisis, and they want to solve. And we saw Trump last week in China visiting, and probably they are trying to arrange because they don't want trade in crucial goods and input to be blocked. And because of that, I think trade continues to be the most important tool for peace. No, unfortunately, still we are not seeing the solution there, but I think it's going to at least for this conflict in the Hormuz Strait is going to be soon a solution.
And we really hope so. And I hope that by the time you are released, everything will be back at least to normal and we will have peace. And as the last question, I want to ask our usual one. What is the message you want to leave with our listeners all over the world? People in business, policy, investor, donors. So it's really what the ICC can tell them.
I could say that at the end, behind every discussion of trade, sustainability, and food systems, there are people. No, there are people that are working every day, and we have to respect that and try to support that. Farmers that get up very early at morning, SMEs that have to challenge with payments every month, every day, families, with their own problems and expectations, and communities, in a bigger perspective. So the future of food cannot be built without this perspective, and taking into account of people. And well, we have to. I think that the solution is cooperation, practical tools, innovation, and more trade. No, never the solution is without the trade. So this is my last reflection.
Fantastic, Sebastian. And that is the most important thing, really, trade as an instrument of peace. So thank you so much, Sebastian, for sharing your views, your insights, and also your work at the International Chamber of Commerce and the work you are doing to foster global trade. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.